Come on into the kitchen to see how I make this plant-based soup. I've gathered all of my ingredients here. Let's get started. I just have some olive oil in the bottom of my pot. This recipe can be eaten fresh or canned. I'm going to put onions in. So olive oil, onions, and some garlic. We use this bottled garlic quite often, but we find that this garlic is not as strong as fresh garlic, so we use quite a chunk of it. Now I've got that on a medium high. I want that to all start I want that to cook until the onions start to get a little bit soft. Okay, my onions are starting to go translucent. That's perfect. I want to put in my vegetables now. I have carrot. That is 2 carrots. I have red pepper. You could use green pepper. I just don't have any in the house right now. You could use corn or kale or chard or any greens that you want, pak choy, whatever greens you want. I don't have any in the house right now, so I'm not using them. I don't have any fresh celery today, so I'm going to be using dried celery leaves. I have maybe a quarter of a cup there, not quite. And I have oregano, and that's a good tablespoon, and another probably 2 teaspoons or a tablespoon of basil, depending on how much of that flavor you want. I have maybe half a teaspoon of thyme and a quarter to half teaspoon of celery seed. The celery seed and celery leaves will work together to bring that fresh celery flavor in. And I'm just going to put them in right now. This soup is very quick to throw together. You will add salt and pepper to this to taste. When I'm canning, I don't use any salt. I want to be able to adjust the salt when I actually go to serve it. Okay, I've put a decent amount of pepper in there. You can always season to taste later, or season to taste as you go to serve it when you open the jar. Salt and pepper are something that we often have on the table, right? So that's something that's great to season to taste later. My husband will put hot sauce in his and then sprinkle Parmesan cheese on top, so this is what it is. I am using 2 cups. This is a pint jar, so that would be 500 mils of tomato sauce. You can use home canned, or you can use a grocery store can of tomato sauce, or your favorite spaghetti sauce, even with all the herbs and everything already in it. I have tomato juice here. You can use tomato juice or vegetable broth. If you bought a carton of vegetable broth, you could use the whole thing, but I like to use the tomato juice, which you could buy a can of tomato juice as well. I'm using that to rinse out this other jar, just so I got most of the goodness out of that jar. Make sure I get all the goodness. So that's 500 mils of tomato juice, 500 mils of tomato sauce, and I'm also going to throw in 500 mils of my homemade vegetable broth. But like I said, if you bought a carton, or if you had Bovril cubes, OXO cubes, you could make use it that way. This is vegetable. And of course, if you wanted to make it beef or chicken, you could do that as well, but today's recipe is plant-based. Because this is very tomatoey, I like to put an appropriate amount of vinegar of your choice. This is balsamic. You could use apple cider vinegar, you could use malt vinegar, you could use white vinegar if that's all you've got. I would prefer to have a vinegar with flavor, and I'm just going to put in maybe a couple of tablespoons into this batch, and a tablespoon or so of just white sugar. The vinegar and the sugar combined alters the tartness of the tomato. It brings it up, but brings it down at the same time, so that it's not too tomatoey. It gives it it balances the flavors in some way. I'm not sure how the chemistry works, but I put in vinegar and sugar. And it even changed the way it smells. So that's it. I just have to bring that to a boil. I'm cranking that up to cook those carrots, get those carrots tender. And then it'll be ready to can. This soup has to be pressure canned. If it was just a tomato-based soup with no vegetables in it, you could water bath can it, but because it's got the carrots and onions and peppers in it, which I wish I had green peppers to put in that, it makes a totally different flavor, but it does need to be pressure canned because of the carrots. I will put the recipe in the description below for both the stovetop lunchtime tomato vegetable soup and for a very large batch that I would use if I was pressure canning. Today I'm not going to be pressure canning. I don't have the time for it, but I still know that I need more tomato vegetable soup. I got the basic vegetable soup recipe from the Bernardin Complete Book of Home Preserving on page 402. According to their instructions, you would put half of the jar filled with solids, and then you would top up the rest with liquids. That way, if the vegetables continue to swell, you're not bursting your jar or throwing off the ratio of how the temperature gets to the inside of the jar. In either case, pints or quarts, you will leave 1 inch of head space. If you're canning in pint size, you will need to pressure can for 55 minutes. Of course, you adjust that to your pressure and your timing for altitude. Mine is under 1,000 feet, so I can go for 55 minutes at 11 pounds of pressure. If I was going for quart size, I would go for 85 minutes, again, adjusting for altitude. This was just a small batch of my soup today. This will serve us for lunch. If I was doing canning, I would have 22 cups of tomato sauce instead of just 2 cups. And I would be doing it with fresh tomatoes instead of canned products. I really don't like to use canned products to make canned products. I'm not sure how the shelf life, you know, if something's expiring, how does that shelf life convert to the new product? But I like to make this when I'm doing fresh stuff too. If I've made tomato sauce and I haven't processed it into jars fast enough, I will use it to make the soup. Then I have to boil it again and make the soup from it. See, there's a big celery leaf already starting to soften, and they're floating in there beautifully. There you go. There's my tomato vegetable soup. I had a special friend in mind while I was making this video, and this is for her.